Far beyond the highways and quiet towns of Idaho, there are canyons so deep that sunlight barely reaches the bottom. Wind howls endlessly through narrow stone walls. Footsteps echo where no one should be walking. And old homesteads sit alone, forgotten by time, clinging to the edges of the land. These were once homes. Places of hope, survival, and isolation. But something went wrong. Families vanished without explanation. Lights were seen burning in empty houses. And voices were heard calling out from deep inside the canyons long after everyone had left. Locals say these homesteads are cursed. That the land remembers fear. And that the canyons do not let souls escape easily. Those who explore these places report feeling watched. Hearing their names whispered from the dark. And seeing figures standing silently at windows that should be empty. Tonight, we journey into the most haunted remote canyon homesteads in Idaho. 20 forgotten places where isolation, tragedy, and something far darker still linger. If you found an abandoned house deep in a canyon, with no road leading back and night falling fast, would you step inside for shelter or would you trust the darkness outside instead? Take a slow breath. And follow me. Hello my dear friend. I am truly glad you are here with me tonight. Before we begin, settle in. Let your breathing slow. Allow the world around you to fade away. Idaho is often thought of as peaceful. Wide skies. Quiet valleys. Endless wilderness. But hidden far from towns and roads are canyons carved deep into the earth. Places where early settlers built homesteads in total isolation. These families lived days away from help. Winters were brutal. Silence was constant. And when something went wrong, there was no one to hear their screams. Over time, many of these homesteads were abandoned. Some after accidents. Some after violence. And some after events no one could explain. Even now, hikers and explorers avoid certain canyons after sunset. They speak of cold spots in summer heat. Of shadows moving against canyon walls. Of doors opening on their own. Tonight, I will guide you through 20 of the most haunted remote canyon homesteads in Idaho. Each one carries a story soaked in fear and loneliness. And before we descend any further, let me ask you something. If you discovered a perfectly intact homestead deep in a canyon, untouched for decades, would curiosity pull you inside, or would fear convince you to walk away forever? The homestead at Dry Echo Canyon sits where sound behaves differently than anywhere else in the region. The land folds inward, stone walls rising high and uneven, creating narrow corridors where wind and voice linger longer than expected. Long before anyone built there, travelers noticed that a shout could return minutes later, softened and distorted, as if the canyon itself was thinking before responding. When the first families settled the land, they treated the echoes as a curiosity. The homestead was modest, built near the canyon floor where water passed during the wet season. At night, voices carried easily between walls of rock. A call from one end of the property could be heard clearly from the other, even after distance should have swallowed it. Children played games with the echoes, laughing as their words came back altered and delayed. Over time, something stranger emerged. Families reported hearing their own voices return hours later. A conversation held in the afternoon might drift back through the canyon after sunset, faint and incomplete. At first, they assumed memory or imagination. But patterns formed. Words returned in the same order they were spoken, sometimes repeating entire sentences long after the speakers had gone inside. The canyon did not simply reflect sound. It stored it. Neighbors noticed that arguments carried farther than laughter. Raised voices lingered longer, circling the stone walls again and again. On quiet nights, fragments of disagreement floated through the air, detached from their original moment. The sound had no direction. It seemed to come from everywhere at once. Still, life continued. The families adapted, lowering their voices, choosing words carefully. They believed the canyon listened, and they treated it with caution rather than fear. The homestead remained occupied for years, weathered but stable, a lone presence in a vast and silent place. Then the echoes changed. Voices began returning that no one remembered speaking. Conversations played out in the night, detailed and unfamiliar. The tone was urgent. Confused. Sometimes calm, sometimes strained. Listeners recognized the voices as human, but could not identify who they belonged to. The sound carried emotion without context. One night, a full exchange echoed through the canyon, lasting several minutes. Two voices spoke back and forth, overlapping, their words bouncing endlessly against the stone. When the voices finally faded, the canyon fell silent again, as if nothing had happened. The families listened from inside their homes, unable to place the moment or the people. When the voices finally faded, the canyon fell silent again, as if nothing had happened. Soon after, the owners vanished. There were no signs of struggle. No evidence of departure. Meals were left unfinished. Doors stood open. Livestock wandered freely. The canyon kept its silence, offering no explanation. Search parties found nothing. The homestead was eventually abandoned, left to weather and time. Wind stripped paint from wood. Sand filled corners and doorways. The canyon walls remained unchanged, towering and patient. It was visitors who noticed the voices returning. At night, when the air cooled and sound traveled farthest, conversations echoed through the canyon again. Unlike before, these were not fragments or repetitions. They were complete exchanges, unfolding naturally as if occurring in real time. They pleaded. They argued. They interrupted one another, their tone rising and falling with emotion. Some sounded desperate. Others sounded defensive. The canyon carried every nuance, amplifying pauses and breath, dragging words across the stone until they felt close enough to touch. Then came the screaming. Not sudden or violent, but stretched and echoed, layered over itself until it became impossible to tell where it began. The sound moved through the canyon slowly, rebounding again and again, as if trapped in an endless loop. Visitors reported that the voices responded to presence. When someone stepped deeper into the canyon, the conversations shifted direction. Adjusting to follow the sound never approached directly. It remained just out of reach, always ahead or behind, circling through unseen paths. Those who stayed too long described a growing pressure. As if the canyon narrowed around them, sound replaced silence entirely. Even footsteps seemed absorbed, drowned out by voices that did not acknowledge the listener. No two experiences were identical. Some heard calm discussions that slowly deteriorated into shouting. Others heard arguments that ended abruptly, cut off mid-sentence. A few claimed to recognize words spoken aloud near the homestead earlier that day, returned in distorted form after nightfall. Experts offered explanations involving acoustics and delayed reverberation, but none could account for the complexity of the sounds. Echoes do not form arguments. They do not plead. They do not scream with intent. The canyon remains unchanged. During the day, dry Echo Canyon is quiet, almost peaceful. Wind moves gently through stone corridors. Birds call and vanish. The homestead stands empty, its walls worn but intact, offering no hint of what occurs after sunset. At night, the canyon listens. Sound travels through its walls, not as reflection, but as memory. Conversations repeat, reshape, and return without origin. Voices gather and scatter, overlapping in ways that suggest more than simple echo. No warnings mark the path to the homestead. No signs explain what visitors might hear. Those who leave before nightfall carry only unease. Those who stay until darkness often leave shaken, unable to forget the sense of being surrounded by voices that know they are there. Dry Echo Canyon does not speak. It replays. And once a sound enters its walls, it may never truly leave. Raven Bend Homestead was built beside a narrow creek where water moved slowly over smooth stone. The land dipped gently toward the bank, and tall grass bent with the current as if listening. The house itself was plain but sturdy, raised by careful hands that expected to stay for generations. It stood alone, distant from neighbors, surrounded by open fields and a line of trees that followed the curve of the water. The family who lived there valued quiet. Days passed with predictable rhythm. Morning light spilled through narrow windows. Evenings ended with lamps glowing softly against the dark. The creek provided water and comfort, its constant movement a steady presence. Nothing about Raven Bend suggested danger. The discovery came without warning. A delivery driver arrived one afternoon and found the front door ajar. Inside, the house was silent. No fire burned in the hearth. No footsteps answered the call. The family was found exactly where daily life had left them, seated, standing, paused mid-task. Their eyes were open, fixed on something unseen. Their bodies showed no sign of struggle. No sign of injury. They appeared frozen, as if time had stopped around them. There were no signs of intrusion. No food was spoiled. No tools were out of place. The medical explanations failed to provide clarity. There was no shared illness, no environmental cause that could be measured. The case closed quietly, labeled unresolved. The house was left empty. At first, nothing seemed different. Wind moved through the grass. Water traced the same shallow path along the creek bed. But at dusk, shapes began to gather along the roofline. Ravens arrived in pairs, then groups, then dozens. They perched along the beams and chimney, silent and watchful, their dark forms outlined against the fading sky. Locals noticed the pattern quickly. The ravens arrived every evening, just before the light failed. They stayed until night fully settled. Then lifted away together, leaving the roof bare once more. No nests were built. No calls were heard. It was as if they came only to observe. Curiosity drew visitors. Those who stepped inside the homestead reported a feeling that settled immediately, heavy and difficult to ignore. The air felt thick, pressing against the chest. Breathing became shallow without effort. Thoughts turned dark without clear reason, focused on loss, on danger, on the certainty that something terrible was moments away. Most left within minutes. The feeling did not fade until they crossed the threshold and put distance between themselves and the house. Outside, the dread lifted gradually, like fog thinning under sunlight. Inside, it returned instantly. Investigators returned with equipment. Temperature, air quality, and structural integrity were tested. Nothing unusual was detected. Yet recordings taken indoors carried subtle distortions. Voices sounded distant, stretched thin, as if heard through water. Cameras occasionally failed to focus on certain rooms, though no physical obstruction could be found. The creek became a point of attention. Its surface reflected the house clearly during the day, but at dusk, the reflection warped slightly, stretching vertical lines into uneven shapes. But at dusk, the reflection warped slightly, stretching vertical lines into uneven shapes. Some claimed the water appeared darker near the bank closest to the homestead. Those samples showed no difference. The sound of the creek seemed louder near the house. Its gentle flow amplified into something closer to a whisper. Neighbors avoided the area after sunset. Those who ignored the warnings described the same experience. A sudden sense of anticipation. A tightening in the stomach. The unmistakable feeling that something was about to happen, something irreversible. The sensation followed them room to room, strongest in the center of the house, where the family had been found. No one reported seeing anything. No figures. No movement. Only the feeling, persistent and specific, as if the house itself remembered a moment it could not release. Over time, the ravens became part of the story. They were counted by locals, their numbers consistent night after night. They never arrived early. Never stayed late. At dusk, they gathered. At full dark, they departed. Their presence felt deliberate, like punctuation marking the end of the day. Attempts to remove them failed. Loud noises, lights, and even barriers did nothing to change their behavior. They returned each evening, silent and unmoving, watching the house below. Years passed, and Raven Bend Homestead fell into disrepair. Wood weathered. Paint peeled. The roof sagged slightly beneath seasons of rain and snow. Still, the ravens came. Still, the dread waited inside, unchanged by time. Today, the homestead stands as it always has, beside the narrow creek, surrounded by grass and sky. At dusk, dark shapes gather overhead, and the house grows heavy with expectation. Those who stand at the doorway often pause, uncertain why they hesitate. Something inside urges them to leave. Something else waits, patient and unseen, as if the moment that froze the family never truly ended, but simply learned to linger. The sun moves across the sky. That should no longer draw attention. Its roof has caved inward. One wall leans at an angle that suggests collapse could come at any moment. Weathered wood has faded to gray, and the doorway hangs open, warped by years of exposure. From a distance, the cabin looks empty, forgotten, and unsafe to approach. Yet as night settles over Blackstone Canyon, the structure appears to wake. The cabin was built decades ago by a solitary worker, who settled near the canyon to live close to his work. Records describe him as quiet and methodical, someone who valued isolation and routine. He maintained the cabin carefully, reinforcing it against harsh winters and sudden storms. For years, light from its windows marked the only sign of human presence in the canyon after dark. One winter, heavy snowfall cut off access to the area for weeks. When conditions finally cleared, the cabin was found partially collapsed. Its interior cold and abandoned. No sign of the occupant was ever discovered. With no clear answers and no reason to rebuild, the cabin was left to decay. Then the lights began to appear. Hikers passing through the canyon at dusk noticed a faint glow flickering behind the cabina's broken windows. The light was unsteady, warm in color, and clearly contained within the structure. At first, it was assumed to be reflections or distant equipment from other travelers. But the canyon was remote, and no one else reported being nearby. As darkness deepened, the glow persisted. Those who stopped to watch described seeing the light move from one side of the cabin to the other, as if carried by someone walking slowly inside. The brightness would dim, then flare again, casting brief shadows against the warped interior walls. From outside, it looked like a lantern being carried across the floor. Along with the light came sound. Footsteps echoed faintly within the cabin. Not heavy, not rushed, but steady and deliberate. Back and forth, pause, then movement again. The pacing followed no clear pattern, yet it felt purposeful. When they approached the doorway, the sound stopped. Those who looked inside found only darkness and debris. The floor was broken in places, covered in dust and fallen beams. No lanterns. No footprints. No sign of recent activity. The air inside felt cold and still, undisturbed by movement. Moments later, stepping back outside, the light would sometimes return, visible once more through gaps in the wall. Attempts to document the phenomenon produced inconsistent results. Cameras left facing the cabin recorded hours of darkness interrupted by brief flashes of light, too faint to reveal a source. Audio equipment captured soft rhythmic sounds resembling footsteps, though no visual movement accompanied them. Visitors often reported a strange sense of hesitation before approaching the cabin. An unspoken feeling that stepping inside would interrupt something ongoing. The structure felt occupied, not by a presence that demanded attention, but by a routine that continued regardless of observation. Some described feeling watched from within the shadows, though no figure ever appeared. The sensation faded when they left the immediate area, replaced by confusion and lingering curiosity. Local guides advise against entering the cabin after sunset. Not because of physical danger alone, but because of the experiences reported by those who linger. Several individuals who stayed nearby overnight described vivid dreams of pacing footsteps and shifting light. They woke repeatedly, certain someone was moving nearby, only to find the canyon silent. At dawn, the cabin returns to its familiar state of decay. Sunlight reveals nothing out of place. Birds perch on broken beams. Wind passes through the open doorway, stirring dust but creating no sound like footsteps. The structure appears exactly as it should, abandoned and still. Yet the night always brings change. Some believe the cabin holds an imprint of daily life repeated without awareness. A pattern set so deeply it continues even after collapse. Others suggest the canyon itself amplifies memory, trapping moments and replaying them when conditions are right. The steady pacing, the moving light, the silence when observed, all point to something bound to routine rather than intention. There is no sign of warning or invitation. The cabin does not draw people in. It does not react to voices or movement outside. It simply continues. Blackstone Canyon remains quiet, its steep walls indifferent to those who pass through. The cabin stands as it has for years, leaning and broken, blending into the stone around it. By day, it is only a ruin. By night, it becomes something else entirely. A place where light moves without flame. Where footsteps echo without feet. Where the inside feels occupied, even when every glance confirms it is empty and silent. Willow Grave Homestead sits at the edge of low rolling land where tall grass gives way to a narrow stand of trees. A weathered house. A leaning barn. A line of willows swaying gently even when the air is still. The land feels quiet in a way that suggests listening rather than peace. The name did not come from folklore. It came from the ground. When the property was surveyed decades ago, workers uncovered several unmarked graves near the tree line. No headstones. No records. Only shallow depressions and soil that gave way too easily. The remains were old, arranged carefully, intentionally. The homestead kept its name, and the land was left largely untouched. Those who lived nearby learned to avoid the area after sunset. During the day, Willow Grave Homestead feels heavy but manageable. The house creaks with age. Floorboards sag. Dust gathers in corners where light struggles to reach. The willows cast long shadows that shift slowly, their branches trailing like fingers brushing the earth. As daylight fades, the trees seem to draw closer together. The space between them narrows, not physically, but perceptually, as if depth itself is being compressed. Sounds travel farther and quieter at the same time. A single footstep can be heard clearly, yet its direction becomes impossible to place. They stand between the trees, just beyond the reach of the porch light. They do not approach. They do not retreat. They simply remain, facing the house, facing the fields, facing anyone who dares to look back. Witnesses describe them as silhouettes rather than forms. No faces. No features. Just the impression of someone standing where no one should be. The longer one watches, the more figures seem to emerge, filling the gaps between the willows until the tree line feels crowded. The first sounds usually come later, when the land grows quiet enough to hear what lies beneath it. Those who hear it describe the sound as methodical, unhurried. It does not echo like normal noise. It feels close, even when no one stands nearby. The scraping moves slowly, sometimes circling the house, sometimes stopping directly beneath the listenera's feet. No disturbed soil is ever found by morning. No tools. No marks. Yet the sound returns, night after night, always after the figures appear. Former residents of the homestead tell similar stories. Sleep becomes difficult. Dreams are filled with weight and pressure, of soil settling and air growing thin. People wake feeling watched, compelled to check the windows despite knowing what they might see. Animals refuse to stay. Dogs whine and scratch at doors. Horses panic without cause. Livestock break fences trying to flee the fields after dark. Even insects seem to avoid the area once night fully sets in. Attempts to investigate the graves have failed repeatedly. Ground-penetrating surveys malfunction. Markers placed near the sites are found knocked over or gently laid flat. Digging equipment stalls without explanation. Workers report nausea and dizziness, an overwhelming sense of being in the wrong place. Locals believe the graves were never meant to be found. According to regional accounts, the land once belonged to a family known for secrecy and isolation. Records show few visitors and no clear explanation for the number of people associated with the property. When the family vanished from public notice, the homestead remained, locked and silent, as if waiting. The willows are said to be key. They grow directly above several of the burial sites, their roots weaving through the soil like a living net. Even in drought, they remain lush and green. Their branches hang low, obscuring the ground beneath, as though intentionally hiding it from view. At night, those branches shift slightly, opening gaps between trunks just wide enough for figures to stand. Some believe the sounds of digging are not from below, but from memory. An echo of actions repeated so often the land itself learned the rhythm. Others think the graves are incomplete, that something is still being prepared, still waiting to be placed where it belongs. What unsettles visitors most is the patience. Nothing at Willow Grave Homestead rushes. The figures do not chase. The sounds do not grow frantic. Everything unfolds slowly, deliberately, as if time itself behaves differently here. Those who stay too long report losing track of hours, convinced only minutes have passed when dawn finally arrives. When morning comes, the land looks unchanged. Dew coats the grass. Birds return to the trees. The house sits quietly, its windows dark. The willows sway gently, their shadows harmless once more. Yet no one doubts what happens after sunset. The graves remain unmarked. The homestead remains empty. No efforts to restore or repurpose the land have lasted. Each attempt ends the same way, with equipment abandoned and workers refusing to return. Willow Grave Homestead does not advertise its history. It does not need to. Those who stand there at night, listening to the slow scrape of shovels and watching the silent figures between the trees, understand that some places are not haunted by sudden violence or anger. Some places are shaped by quiet, repetitive acts. And some land never forgets where the digging began. Cold Split Canyon Homestead sits deep between towering rock walls where sunlight struggles to reach the ground. The homestead was built for resilience. Its walls were thick, reinforced against wind and snow. Supplies were stored carefully. Fires were kept strong through long winters. The family who lived there understood the risks of isolation and prepared for them, believing discipline and routine were enough to endure whatever the canyon delivered. For years, they were right. Winter storms came and went, filling the canyon with snow that piled high against doors and windows. The family waited them out, sheltered and patient, marking time by firewood and daylight. Cold Split Canyon earned its name honestly, but it was manageable. Until the storm that did not move on. It arrived quietly, snow falling steady and thick, carried by a wind that never seemed to rest. Within hours, the canyon narrowed beneath white walls. Paths vanished. The sky disappeared behind swirling gray. The family sealed themselves inside, trusting their preparation. Days passed. Snow pressed against the structure from every side, sealing cracks, blocking vents, muting sound. The canyon became silent except for the wind, which howled endlessly above the roof. Inside, the fire burned day and night. Supplies were rationed. Conversation grew quieter. Then the cold changed. Despite the fire, rooms felt colder than before. Breath became faintly visible indoors, a detail dismissed at first as imagination. Frost appeared along window edges, then crept across walls where heat should have prevented it. The family layered clothing and stayed close together, waiting for the storm to end. The temperature continued to drop, unnaturally fast, as though the cold had found a way inside. Firewood vanished at an alarming rate. The wind outside grew louder, pressing against the homestead with a steady force that rattled beams and froze hinges solid. Then everything stopped. When the storm finally cleared, Cold Split Canyon stood still beneath a pale sky. Searchers arrived days later. They found the homestead intact. The door was closed from the inside. Supplies remained partially used. The fire pit was cold. Frost coated the interior walls in delicate patterns, thick enough to dull sound and color. The family was gone. No trace explained where they had gone or how they left. Clinging stubbornly to every surface. Summer returned, bringing heat to the surrounding land. Visitors noticed the change immediately. As they approached the structure, the temperature dropped without warning. On clear days, when the sun burned overhead, a sudden chill wrapped around the body like unseen fog. Breath became visible in short bursts. Skin prickled as though exposed to winter air. Instruments showed normal temperatures outside, but readings inside fluctuated wildly, dipping far below what the season allowed. The cold was not uniform. Certain rooms felt colder than others, particularly those deepest within the structure. Some felt sudden pressure in the chest, as if the air had grown heavier. Others described a creeping numbness that traveled slowly up the limbs, fading only after leaving the homestead. Staying too long brought headaches, disorientation, and a powerful urge to leave. No visible source explained it. The homestead showed no structural damage that could account for the temperature. No underground vents. No hidden ice pockets. The cold appeared self-contained, anchored to the building itself. At night, the effect worsened. Moonlight illuminated frost that seemed thicker than before. Walls cracked softly as ice expanded. Breath clouds lingered longer in the air, slow to disperse. Some visitors claimed to hear faint creaking sounds, rhythmic and steady, like movement beneath frozen floors. No figures were ever seen. No voices followed. The homestead offered no overt threat, only an environment that resisted warmth with quiet determination. Locals believe the winter storm never truly ended inside Cold Split Canyon Homestead. They say the cold trapped within the walls during those final days, sealed in when the door closed for the last time. The canyon, already prone to holding air and sound, became a container for that moment. The cold does not spread beyond the structure. Step outside, and the temperature returns to normal within seconds. Step back in, and the chill resumes, precise and immediate, as if recognizing the boundary of the walls. No efforts to remove it have succeeded. Fires burn weakly inside. Heaters fail without explanation. Warm air vanishes as quickly as it appears, swallowed by frost that refuses to melt. Frost coats the walls. And the canyon holds the memory of a winter that never let go. Breath clouds the air. Frost coats the walls. And the canyon holds the memory of a winter that never let go. The homestead at Silent Drop Canyon sits near a sheer cliff where the land ends without warning. The drop is sudden and absolute, a vertical fall into shadow where sound disappears before it reaches the bottom. From the porch, the canyon appears calm, carved by time and wind, its walls pale and smooth beneath changing light. The house was built carefully, set back just far enough to feel safe. Its foundation rested on solid stone. The family who settled there believed distance and awareness were enough. The cliff was respected, never challenged, never approached without reason. During the day, the canyon felt distant, almost unreal, as if it belonged to another place entirely. At night, everything changed. Moonlight slid across the ground and filled the canyon with pale glow. Shadows stretched and merged, blurring edges that were sharp by day. Sound traveled strangely near the drop, carried and reshaped by the open space. The first incident was treated as an accident. A local ranch hand was found at the base of the cliff one morning after a full moon. No one recalled seeing him near the edge. He had not mentioned visiting the homestead. There were no signs of a struggle, no reason for him to have been there at all. The canyon kept its silence. Then it happened again. Another full moon passed, and another body was found below, farther along the cliff face. The pattern emerged slowly, unwillingly. Each time the moon was full, someone fell. Each time, there were no witnesses. No one ever reported seeing a figure near the edge, no lantern light, no movement against the sky. Locals began to listen. On nights when the moon rose bright and round, people living near the canyon heard footsteps. They came from the direction of the homestead, steady and unhurried, moving across ground that should have been empty. The steps always followed the same path, approaching the cliff, one after another. Then they stopped. No cry followed. No impact. Only silence, deeper than before, settling over the canyon like a held breath. Those who heard the footsteps rarely slept afterward. Morning always brought confirmation that something had happened. Investigators searched the area repeatedly. They found no tracks near the edge, no disturbed soil, no signs that anyone had stood there recently. Equipment was placed near the cliff. Cameras recorded empty ground. Audio devices captured wind, distant night sounds, and sometimes the faint suggestion of steps that did not match any known pattern. The recordings were inconsistent, arriving late or cutting off abruptly, as if something interfered only at specific moments. The homestead itself felt unchanged. By day, it appeared quiet and abandoned, weathered but intact. Inside, dust lay undisturbed. Furniture remained in place. Nothing suggested recent presence. Yet those who entered reported an uneasy sensation, as if the house expected something to happen and was waiting for the right night. Full moons brought tension. People avoided the canyon roads. Windows were shuttered. Lights were left on through the night. Despite precautions, the footsteps returned. Always the same pace. Always the same direction. Always ending at the cliff. Some claimed the sound was not quite human. The rhythm was consistent but slightly off, as if each step required effort. Others said the footsteps seemed to hesitate near the end, as though something considered the final moment carefully. Those who tried described an overwhelming urge to leave, a sense that standing there was dangerous even without moving. The air felt thinner near the cliff, cooler, heavier. Breathing required focus, and thoughts narrowed to escape. Over time, theories formed quietly. Some believed the canyon amplified distant sounds, turning memory into noise. Others suggested geological effects, pressure changes, or unseen animals. None could explain why the sounds only occurred during full moons, or why the pattern never varied. The list of incidents grew. Names were added. Dates circled. The homestead remained central to every report, its silence intact. Wood aged and cracked. The porch sagged slightly. Still, the footsteps continued. Still, the moon marked time. The canyon never revealed what lay below its edge, holding its depth in shadow. Today, Silent Drop Canyon is avoided by most. Those who pass through during daylight feel watched without seeing anything. At night, especially under a full moon, the land seems to wait. Sound carries too far. Silence feels too deliberate. When the moon is full and the air is clear, footsteps can still be heard. They approach the cliff. Then they stop. And the canyon accepts what no one ever sees. Ash Hollow Homestead once stood at the edge of a wide valley, where dry grass met low rolling hills. It was a simple place, built from timber hauled by hand, and stone gathered from nearby ground. The family who lived there chose isolation over comfort, shaping a quiet life far from towns and passing roads. Smoke from the chimney was often the only sign of human presence for miles. The homestead functioned as both shelter and livelihood. Fields stretched outward in neat rows. A barn stood close by, and a well marked the center of daily routine. Fire played a central role in survival. It warmed the house, cooked meals, and lit the long evenings. Care was taken with every flame, because the land was dry and unforgiving. One night, that balance failed. The fire began small, likely from a single overlooked ember. Wind moved through the valley faster than expected, feeding the flames until they raced across wood and cloth. The homestead burned quickly. Neighbors were too far away to see the glow in time. By morning, nothing remained but blackened ground and collapsed stone. The site was abandoned soon after. Survivors never rebuilt. Over the years, grass reclaimed the land. The ruins sank into the earth. Yet the place did not fully return to silence. Visitors walking through the valley often noticed the smell first. A faint but distinct scent of smoke, carried on still air. It appears without warning and disappears just as suddenly. There are no nearby fires, no burned brush, no reason for the smell to exist. Lingers low to the ground, strongest near where the house once stood. At dusk, the atmosphere changes. Those who remain near the ruins as daylight fades report seeing movement among the stones. As darkness deepens, the figures become clearer. Human in outline, yet incomplete. Their faces appear darkened, as if marked by soot and shadow. Features are blurred, but mouths are visible, stretched open in expressions frozen in time. No sound accompanies them. The figures do not move toward observers. They appear near the foundation stones, near the place where walls once stood. Some seem to stand together, others slightly apart, all facing outward. Their presence lasts only moments before fading back into the night air, leaving behind the smell of smoke and a heavy stillness. Those who witness the figures describe a profound sense of interruption. As if they are seeing something not meant to be observed. The air feels warmer near the ruins, even on cold nights. Breathing becomes shallow, not from fear alone, but from the density of the atmosphere itself. Breathing becomes shallow, not from fear alone, but from the density of the atmosphere itself. Researchers who have studied the site during daylight hours find little to explain the reports. Soil samples confirm the presence of old fire damage consistent with a historical blaze. Charcoal fragments remain deep below the surface. But there is no source for the ongoing scent. No chemical residue capable of producing it after so many years. Nighttime investigations yield little clarity. Cameras occasionally capture faint distortions of light near the ruins. But nothing clearly defined. Audio recordings remain silent, even when witnesses report visual activity. The lack of sound becomes one of the most unsettling aspects. The figures appear expressive, yet completely voiceless. Local accounts suggest the fire spread faster than anyone could react. That the occupants were caught by surprise, trapped by smoke and collapsing beams. These stories are never told in detail. The focus remains on what lingers, not what happened. The belief is that the suddenness of the event left something unresolved, impressed onto the land itself. The figures are not believed to be aware. They do not change behavior when watched. They appear and vanish according to patterns no one fully understands. Often just after sunset. Sometimes near dawn. Never in full daylight. Those who linger too long report lingering effects. Clothes carry the scent of smoke long after leaving the valley. Sleep becomes restless. Dreams are filled with heat and confusion, ending abruptly before resolution. These effects fade over time, but the memory of the place remains vivid. Despite warnings, curiosity draws people back to Ash Hollow Homestead. Some come seeking answers. Others simply want to witness what has been described. Most leave quietly, unsettled but unharmed. A few return multiple times. Drawn by a sense of unfinished presence they cannot explain. The land itself appears unchanged by these visits. Grass grows. Wind moves gently through the valley. Birds return at dawn. The ruins remain low and unobtrusive, easy to miss in full light. Nothing about the place demands attention during the day. But night reveals what daylight conceals. The smell returns. The air thickens. Shapes gather briefly where walls once stood. Faces darkened by memory emerge. Mouths open in silent expression. Fixed in a moment that never completed itself. Then they fade. Leaving only cold ground and quiet stars. Ash Hollow Homestead does not announce its past. It does not dramatize its loss. It simply continues to hold it. A place where fire never fully went out. Where the end of a single night still presses gently against the present. The ruins remain, and the valley endures. But when darkness settles and the wind stills, the land remembers what it witnessed. And for a few brief moments, it allows others to remember as well. Twin Shadow Canyon cuts deep into the land, its walls rising high and close enough to block the sun for most of the day. Light enters only in narrow angles, splitting the rock into bands of brightness and shade that slide slowly as the hours pass. It is from this natural division that the canyon earned its name, long before the disappearance that made it known beyond the region. The family lived in a modest home near the canyon floor, tucked against stone that still held warmth after sunset. They were known to locals as quiet and self-sufficient. No conflicts. No debts. No reason to leave without warning. Their days followed a predictable rhythm shaped by the movement of light and shadow along the canyon walls. On the morning they were discovered missing, nothing appeared disturbed. The front door was unlocked. Lamps were still on. Dinner sat cooling on the table, untouched. Plates were set neatly, as if the family had been moments away from sitting down. Neighbors combed the canyon floor. Rangers traced the trails above. The river was checked, then checked again. No clothing, no tools, no evidence of an accident or escape. The canyon, vast and echoing, offered nothing back. As days passed, attention shifted from the missing to the place itself. Investigators noted something unusual almost immediately. Shadows inside the house did not behave as expected. Corners darkened without cause. Shapes stretched along the walls even when lights were steady. At first, this was attributed to the canyon's unique light patterns. But the behavior continued after sunset. Those who stayed late reported seeing shadows detach slightly from their sources. A Chira's outline would lag behind when someone moved past it. A persona's silhouette would appear longer than it should, sliding across the floor in the opposite direction of the light. The canyon walls proved even more unsettling. As night fell, shadows crept upward along the stone, not cast by any visible object. They stretched thin, then widened, crawling across the rock face like something testing its reach. When clouds passed over the moon, the shadows did not fade. They remained, layered over one another, shifting slowly as if alive. Cameras struggled to capture the effect. Time stamps glitched. Batteries drained rapidly. Some recordings contained frames of complete darkness inserted between clear images, lasting only fractions of a second. Search teams began limiting their hours. Those who remained overnight described a growing sense of pressure, as though the canyon were narrowing further after dark. Sounds behaved strangely. Footsteps echoed twice. Voices returned from the walls altered, deeper, slower. Even breathing felt louder, amplified by the stone. Most disturbing was the sensation of being observed, not from above or behind, but from within the shadows themselves. Several volunteers reported the same experience. While standing still, they noticed their own shadows shifting slightly, stretching farther than their movements allowed. No one reported fear at first. Only confusion. Then unease. Theories emerged. Some suggested rare optical effects unique to the canyon's geometry. Others pointed to fatigue, stress, and expectation shaping perception. None could explain why the phenomenon intensified near the family's home, or why it seemed to respond to attention. The house was eventually sealed. Still, hikers passing through Twin Shadow Canyon continue to report anomalies. At dusk, shadows gather along the walls earlier than expected. At night, they linger even when light sources are removed. Some travelers claim to see shapes moving ahead of them, guiding their path deeper into the canyon before vanishing. Others notice their shadows stretching toward the house site, even when standing far away. The canyon remains open, but rarely visited. Locals avoid staying after sunset. They believe the shadows are not empty, but filled with absence. Shaped by whatever left with the family. No remains have ever been found. The dinner table was cleared months later. But the house itself remains intact. Dust gathers slowly, undisturbed. Windows reflect the canyon walls, doubling the darkness inside. At certain angles, the reflections do not match the structure, showing elongated shapes that should not exist. At night, when the canyon falls silent and the last light slips away, they stretch. They crawl. And along the stone walls of Twin Shadow Canyon, they continue to move independently of any light, as if remembering the night they were no longer alone. Dead Man Run Homestead sat alone at the edge of a narrow valley where the wind rarely settled and the land seemed to funnel movement into a single path. The terrain was uneven, marked by shallow ravines and pale stone that reflected sound in odd ways. Even during the day, the area felt watched, as though the land paid close attention to anyone who crossed it. The homestead itself was solid and well maintained. Built low to the ground with thick walls and reinforced doors, it showed no signs of neglect. The family who lived there were known to be private but orderly. Neighbors described them as cautious, attentive, and deeply familiar with the land around them. There was no history of conflict, no sign of fear, and no indication that they planned to leave. Then one morning, the homestead was silent. Animals wandered freely with no one to tend them. Smoke did not rise from the chimney. When nearby ranchers approached, they found the doors locked from the inside. Windows were sealed. Nothing appeared broken or disturbed. The house stood exactly as it should, except for the absence of life within it. Authorities forced entry. Inside, everything was in place. Furniture remained undisturbed. Food sat untouched. Beds were made. There were no signs of struggle, no written notes, no clues explaining where the family had gone or how they had left a locked home without unlocking the doors. The case was eventually abandoned. Dead Man Run Homestead remained empty, standing untouched as seasons passed. Wind carried dust through the valley. Grass grew taller around the foundation. The structure aged slowly, preserved more by isolation than care. It was visitors who noticed the change. Those who stepped inside for the first time described an immediate sensation of being followed. Not watched from afar, but trailed closely, as if someone stood just behind them. The feeling intensified with each step deeper into the house, growing more specific, more personal. Then came the breathing. Heavy and deliberate, it sounded close enough to feel. Visitors reported hearing it directly behind their heads, slow and steady, out of sync with their own breath. Turning around revealed nothing. The space behind them remained empty, silent except for the faint echo of their own movement. Yet the sensation persisted. Warm breath brushed against the back of the neck, unmistakable and brief, sending a sharp chill through the body despite the heat of the day. Those who stayed longer felt the presence shift. The breathing grew louder when they paused, quieter when they moved. It never spoke. It never touched. It simply remained close, attentive, as though observing with patience. No two experiences were exactly the same. Some visitors described a single presence. Others felt surrounded, breath touching from different angles at once. A few claimed the air itself felt warmer near their shoulders, as if someone leaned close without making contact. Scientific explanations failed to satisfy. Airflow patterns could not account for the warmth. Structural drafts did not explain the timing or proximity. Recordings captured nothing unusual. The house appeared empty in every measurable way. Night amplified the effect. After sunset, the homestead felt smaller, the walls closer together. Sound carried poorly, absorbed rather than echoed. Breathing became more frequent, closer, sometimes overlapping, as if more than one presence occupied the space behind the visitor. Some reported feeling pressure against their upper back, gentle but insistent, guiding them forward. Others felt a sudden warmth near the ear, followed by an overwhelming urge to leave. No one reported seeing a figure. No shadows moved independently. No reflections appeared in glass. The experience relied entirely on sensation, sound, and proximity without form. The locked doors became a central detail in local stories. People wondered whether the family had fled from something already inside. Whether they had hidden, or whether they had never left at all. The house offered no answers, only the sense that something remained where it had always been. Over time, fewer people entered the homestead. Those who did rarely stayed long. Most stepped inside, paused, then left abruptly, unsettled and unable to explain why. A few attempted overnight stays and left before midnight, shaken by the constant closeness of unseen breath in the darkness. The homestead has never shown signs of decay beyond normal aging. Doors still close properly. Floors remain intact. The interior feels preserved, as if time slowed once the family disappeared. Dust gathers slowly. Nothing feels abandoned in the usual sense. Locals say Dead Man Run Homestead is not empty. They believe something learned the rhythm of the family who lived there. Their breathing. Their movement. Their presence. When they vanished, that pattern remained, repeating without source or body. The breathing does not threaten. It does not chase. It stays close, warm, patient, and constant. Step outside, and the sensation ends instantly. The air cools. The valley opens. The feeling of being followed disappears as though it never existed. But inside the homestead, it returns. Heavy breathing behind you. Warm breath at your neck. And the undeniable certainty that you are not alone, even when no one can be seen. At Pine Needle Canyon, a homestead remains perfectly preserved, tucked between steep walls of stone and tall pines that shed their needles year after year without ever burying the house. The homestead was built with intention. Its foundation sits level despite the uneven ground. The door opens without resistance, its hinges quiet, as if recently oiled. Inside, everything is orderly. Beds are made with smooth covers pulled tight. Pillows are arranged evenly, edges aligned. Chairs stand upright at tables, pushed in just enough to suggest recent use. Dishes rest clean and dry on shelves. No dust gathers, even in corners where it should have settled long ago. There is no sign of haste. There is no sign of haste. There is no sign of chaos. There is no sign of haste. There is no sign of chaos. There is no sign of haste. There is no sign of haste. There is no sign of chaos. There is no sign of haste. There is no sign of haste. There is no sign of haste. There is no sign of chaos. There is no sign of haste. There is no sign of chaos. There is no sign of haste. There is no sign of haste. There is no sign of chaos. There is no sign of haste. There is no sign of chaos. There is no sign of haste. There is no sign of haste. The family who lived here did not flee. They did not pack. They did not leave behind scattered belongings or unfinished work. The house feels paused rather than emptied, caught between moments and held there. Visitors notice the silence first. The canyon blocks distant sound, leaving only the faint movement of air through pine branches. Inside the house, even that fades. Footsteps sound muted, absorbed by the floor. Voices feel out of place, as if the walls were not meant to hear them. Mirrors hang throughout the homestead. They are placed with care, framed simply, positioned to reflect light from windows during the day. At first glance, they appear ordinary. Glass is clear. Surfaces are clean. Reflections seem accurate, responding as expected. Until they do not. The delay is subtle. A step forward is mirrored after the movement has finished. The lag is brief, almost dismissible, just long enough to cause doubt. Most people assume fatigue or distraction and look away quickly. Those who stare longer notice more. Expressions do not always match. A neutral face might be met with a softened version, eyes warmer, mouth slightly curved. They insist they did not smile themselves. Equipment behaves strangely inside the house. Clocks slow, then correct themselves. Audio recordings pick up faint delays, echoes that do not match the space. Video files sometimes skip frames when mirrors are visible, smoothing over moments that witnesses insist were longer. The canyon itself feels unchanged. Outside, pine needles blanket the ground in soft layers. Trees grow tall and straight, their trunks unmarked. Wildlife avoids the immediate area around the homestead but leaves no sign of alarm. Birds circle above, then move on without landing. Those who stay overnight rarely sleep. The house remains still, yet the sense of presence grows stronger after dark. Reflections become harder to ignore. Passing a mirror without looking feels uncomfortable, as if turning away from a conversation mid-sentence. Looking directly brings a tightening in the chest, a quiet awareness of timing slipping out of sync. One visitor described the mirrors as learning. They seemed to improve, matching movements more precisely as time passed, while adding small details that had not been there before. A tilt of the head. A pause. A look of recognition. The visitor left before dawn and refused to return. No official records explain when the homestead was abandoned. Property documents list ownership that ends without transfer. Census records show a family present, then absent, without note. There are no reports of disaster, illness, or conflict tied to Pine Needle Canyon. Seasons pass. Snow melts. Heat rises and fades. Locals avoid mirrors in their own homes when the canyon fog thickens. They say reflections feel slower on those days, heavier somehow. The fog never reaches the homestead itself. It stops at the canyon edge, as if respecting a boundary already in place. Those who leave Pine Needle Canyon describe a lingering unease. For days afterward, mirrors feel unfamiliar. Reflections seem too attentive. Movements are checked twice, expressions studied for reassurance. The sensation fades gradually, but never entirely. The homestead remains open, unchanged. Beds stay made. Chairs remain upright. Mirrors wait silently, catching light and movement. Holding moments just slightly longer than they should. In Pine Needle Canyon, time does not flow evenly. It watches, reflects, and sometimes smiles first. Crow Mouth Canyon curves inward like a natural corridor carved by time and wind. Its walls rise steep and dark, narrowing as they lead deeper into shadow. Near the bend where the stone closes in, a homestead once stood. It was built close to a cave set low into the canyon wall, its opening wide and uneven, shaped like a silent mouth watching the valley floor. The family who settled there chose the location for shelter and water. The cave offered protection from wind and heat. And the stone walls reflected warmth back toward the house at night. During the day, the canyon carried sound easily. Voices echoed. Footsteps linger. Life felt contained but secure. At night, after lamps were dimmed and the house grew quiet, faint singing drifted from the direction of the cave. The melody was slow and repetitive, like a lullaby meant to soothe restless minds. The children described it as familiar, though none could say where they had heard it before. Parents dismissed the reports as imagination shaped by echo and fatigue. The canyon amplified sound, and wind passing through the cave could produce strange tones. Still, the children insisted the singing followed patterns, rising and falling with deliberate rhythm. Some said it stopped when they listened too closely, then resumed once attention faded. As weeks passed, the reports became more specific. The children insisted the singing followed patterns, rising and falling with deliberate rhythm. Some said it stopped when they listened too closely, then resumed once attention faded. The singing did not carry during the day. It began only after sunset, when shadows filled the canyon. And the cave entrance disappeared into darkness. The melody slowed over time, stretching notes longer than seemed natural. At times, the pitch wavered, as if the voice producing it struggled to maintain form. The children grew uneasy. Sleep became difficult. They asked to move beds farther from the canyon wall. One child refused to sleep at night at all, claiming the singing sounded closer when eyes were closed. No one else in the household heard it clearly, but all felt a subtle change in the air after dark. Eventually, the family left. No single event forced the decision. The land remained productive. The structure remained sound. But the sense of comfort never returned. The cave felt too present, too aware. After the homestead was abandoned, wind and dust reclaimed the building. Wood faded. Roof beams weakened. The cave remained unchanged, silent by day. The cave felt too present, too aware. After the homestead was abandoned, wind and dust reclaimed the building. Wood faded. Roof beams weakened. The cave remained unchanged, silent by day. The cave felt too present, too aware. For years, nothing more was said. Then travelers passing through Crow Mouth Canyon began reporting similar experiences. Campers who stayed overnight near the old homestead site described hearing singing long after dark. The sound carried from within the cave, low and drawn out. Unlike earlier reports, the melody no longer felt gentle. Notes dragged unevenly, as if stretched by distance or time. Some described the voice as layered, like several tones overlapping slightly out of sync. Others said the melody repeated incorrectly, missing expected pauses or holding notes too long. The effect was unsettling, not loud, but persistent. Earplugs dulled it but did not remove it completely. Those who approached the cave entrance found only darkness and cool air. The sound did not grow louder near the opening. Instead, it seemed to retreat inward, deeper into the stone. No movement was detected. No echo returned the melody. It was absorbed completely, as if the cave swallowed sound rather than reflected it. Audio recordings captured fragments of the singing, but playback revealed distortions not present to the ear. Notes warped. Timing shifted. The melody felt slowed further, almost unrecognizable. Technicians confirmed the recordings were unaltered. The distortion appeared to originate at the source. Locals began avoiding the canyon at night. Those who ignored warnings often reported vivid dreams after visiting. Dreams of standing in narrow spaces, surrounded by stone that felt warm and close. Dreams where singing filled the air but no singer could be found. Waking brought confusion and a lingering sense of being listened to. The singing follows no strict schedule. Some nights it begins shortly after dusk. Other nights it waits until the canyon is fully dark and still. It never continues past sunrise. As light reaches the cave entrance, the melody slows further, stretching until it dissolves into silence. No one has entered the cave deeply since the reports returned. Attempts to explore beyond the entrance result in immediate disorientation. Sounds behave unpredictably. Footsteps seem delayed. Voices fail to echo. Explorers describe an urge to turn back that intensifies with each step forward. There are no markings inside the cave. No signs of habitation. No evidence of instruments or human presence. The stone walls remain bare and smooth, shaped only by water and time. Yet something within the cave produces sound that mimics memory rather than voice. Some believe the canyon itself learned the lullabies once sung in the homestead. That repeated nights of comfort and routine shaped the acoustics into imitation. Others believe the cave holds echoes from another time, stretched and slowed as they cycle endlessly through stone. Whatever the cause, the singing continues. Crow Mouth Canyon appears unchanged during daylight hours. The Homestead site lies quiet and empty. The cave entrance waits in shadow, unremarkable and still. Wind moves freely through the narrow walls. The canyon grows still. The melody returns. Slow. Distorted. Familiar in a way that cannot be placed. A lullaby without origin, drifting from stone that remembers too much. And each night, the canyon listens as it sings itself back into the dark. Iron Creek Homestead rests where the land slopes downward into fast-moving water. The house stands just far enough back to avoid flooding, its foundations darkened by moisture and age. From a distance, it appears sturdy, even welcoming, framed by tall grass and alder trees bent toward the water. Up close, the air feels colder. The homestead was built during an era when isolation was expected. Thick timber walls. Narrow windows. Iron fixtures hammered by hand. Every element suggests endurance. Yet despite its solid construction, the house was abandoned suddenly. Left to face the sound of the creek alone. No official reason was ever recorded. The homestead stands as a testament to the enduring power of the unknown. Visitors often notice the chains first. They are not visible at a glance, but once heard, impossible to ignore. A slow dragging sound carries over the water, uneven and deliberate, like heavy metal being pulled across rock. At first, it blends with the creek, rising and falling with the current. Then it separates itself, gaining rhythm. The sound does not stay in one place. Those who walk the property report hearing the chains shift position, sometimes near the water's edge, sometimes closer to the house. The noise pauses often, as if whatever pulls the weight is stopping to rest. Then it resumes, scraping with renewed effort. No chains are found during daylight. The creek itself appears ordinary. Clear water. Smooth stones. Moss clinging to shaded banks. Yet at certain times, especially after dusk, the surface seems disturbed by more than current alone. Ripples form against the flow. Small waves push inward toward the shore, as though something has entered upstream and is moving deliberately. It is along the bank that the footprints appear. Wet impressions press into the soil and grass, leading away from the creek. They are deep, heavy, spaced unevenly. Water pools within them, reflecting whatever light is nearby. The prints do not fade quickly, even on dry nights. They point directly toward the house. Always toward the house. Visitors who follow the trail often stop at the porch. The footprints end there, just short of the door. No prints ever return to the water. Inside, the homestead feels damp regardless of weather. Wooden floors remain cool underfoot. Walls carry a faint mineral scent, as though the creek has found its way inside over many years. Iron fixtures show signs of corrosion, flaking slowly despite being sheltered from rain. The dragging sound grows louder indoors. Those who enter the house at night describe hearing the chains move beneath the floorboards. The sound travels room to room, sometimes directly below, sometimes just out of reach. Floorboards vibrate faintly, responding to movement below them. No access points exist beneath the house that could explain it. Attempts to locate the source have failed. When the sound stops, the silence feels heavier than the noise. In those moments, visitors often notice water dripping where none should be. Puddles form briefly on the floor, then recede without trace. Footprints appear again, wet and dark, crossing rooms that moments before were dry. They lead deeper inside. The history of Iron Creek Homestead is sparse but unsettling. Records indicate the original occupants relied heavily on the creek. It powered tools, cooled equipment, and served as the primary water source. Iron was worked on site, shaped and cooled repeatedly in the rushing current. Chains were forged here, heavy and durable, meant to restrain livestock and secure loads. One entry mentions an accident near the water, but offers no detail. After that, records stop. Locals say the creek remembers. That water which rushes endlessly over stone learns the shape of what enters it. They believe something was lost in the current, bound by iron and weight, pulled under where sound and light behave differently. Those who stay too long report an increasing sense of being followed. Not watched from a distance, but accompanied. Footsteps echo behind them out of sync with their own. Turning reveals nothing, yet the feeling persists, as if the space between movement and sound has been disturbed. Sleep is difficult near Iron Creek. At night, the dragging resumes more frequently. Chains scrape stone outside, then closer, then beneath the house itself. Some hear water splashing where the creek cannot reach. Others hear slow, labored movement across the porch, followed by the unmistakable sound of wet steps crossing the threshold. Doors do not open. Nothing enters visibly. Yet the house feels occupied. Morning light often reveals the footprints once more. Leading from the creek. Onto the porch. Into the house. Into the house. They stop abruptly in the center of the largest room, as if whatever followed them no longer needed to move. By midday, the prints fade. The floors dry. The creek resumes its ordinary sound. The homestead returns to stillness. Authorities have considered restoring the property, but efforts never last. Workers report hearing the chains during inspections. Equipment left overnight is found damp and displaced. Tools rust far faster than expected. No one stays after dark anymore. Iron Creek Homestead remains standing, its windows reflecting the rushing water nearby. The creek never slows. It never rests. And when night falls, and the sound of chains rises above the current, the path from water to house appears once again. Wet footprints forming quietly. Leading inward. Waiting for anyone who chooses to follow them. The red soil homestead stood on land stained deep with iron-rich earth, where the ground held heat long after sunset and dust clung stubbornly to everything it touched. From a distance, the place looked ordinary, a single structure resting beneath an open sky, surrounded by fields that once promised stability and growth. But the soil remembered more than crops. The family who settled there believed hard work would overcome any challenge. They built the homestead with care, reinforced walls, wide windows, and a layout meant to gather people together rather than push them apart. At first, the house echoed with routine sounds, shared meals, footsteps across wood, and quiet evenings broken only by wind moving through tall grass. Over time, tension crept in. Arguments began as low voices behind closed doors. Disagreements lingered longer than they should have, replayed again and again without resolution. Neighbors noticed raised voices drifting across the fields late at night, sharp and emotional, carried farther by the open land. The red soil absorbed it all. As months passed, the arguments grew louder and more frequent. Doors slammed. Walls shook. The homestead became known for its unrest, a place where calm never seemed to settle. Even during the day, the air felt strained, heavy with unspoken frustration. Those who entered felt it immediately. Visitors described discomfort without clear cause, a tightness in the chest, a sense of standing in the middle of a conflict they could not see. The family tried to leave more than once. Each attempt ended with them returning, bound by obligation, land, or unfinished matters they could not abandon. The arguments followed them back every time, resuming with greater intensity, as though the house itself refused to let the tension dissipate. Then one night, the shouting did not stop. Neighbors later said the voices rose and fell for hours, overlapping, circling the homestead like a storm that could not move on. The ground seemed to tremble faintly beneath the noise. Lights burned late into the night, then went dark all at once. By morning, the house was empty. No belongings were taken. No signs of struggle remained. The family was simply gone, leaving behind a home saturated with the echoes of conflict. The red soil homestead was abandoned without explanation, its doors unlocked, its windows open to the wind. At first, people avoided the place out of respect. Then curiosity returned. Visitors who stepped inside found the interior unchanged, furniture still arranged as it had been, surfaces coated in a fine layer of dust. But silence never lasted. Voices erupted suddenly from empty rooms, loud and unmistakable, arguments replaying without warning. The shouting carried emotion without clarity. Anger surged through the words, even when the language itself was indistinct. Some voices sounded familiar, others blurred together, overlapping until it became impossible to separate one from another. The sound did not echo naturally. It pressed outward, vibrating walls and floors with raw intensity. Walls seemed to respond. Wood panels rattled softly. Plaster hummed with low resonance. The structure itself appeared to pulse with the rhythm of raised voices, as though the house had learned the pattern and repeated it on its own. No recordings captured the phenomenon accurately. Devices picked up only faint distortions, background noise where voices should have been clear. Yet anyone standing inside could hear them plainly, loud enough to cause discomfort, close enough to feel personal. The shouting moved. One moment it filled a single room. The next, it shifted down the hall. Then returned behind the listener. The sound never stayed in one place for long. Circling endlessly, refusing to settle. Some visitors felt the walls vibrate beneath their hands, as if energy pressed outward from within. Others reported headaches, rising anxiety, and a sudden urge to respond, to shout back into the empty space. Those who tried found no relief. Raising their voices only seemed to intensify the sound around them. The house answered with louder arguments, sharper tones, and longer bursts of noise. Silence returned only after leaving the structure entirely. Outside, the shouting stopped instantly. The fields were quiet. The wind moved normally. The red soil lay still beneath the sun. Step back inside, and the voices resumed as though never interrupted. Locals believe the homestead absorbed the emotion poured into it over years of unresolved conflict. The land rich with iron and heat held on to that energy, anchoring it within the walls. The house did not create the anger, it preserved it. Over time fewer people entered. Those who did rarely stayed long. Even standing near the threshold brought discomfort, a faint vibration felt through the ground. At night the homestead glowed faintly red under moonlight, not visibly but in the way it seemed to radiate warmth and unrest. The shouting never formed words of resolution. No apologies followed. No calm explanations emerged. No apologies followed. No calm explanations emerged. 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 The land appears peaceful to those passing by. But step inside, and the air shifts. Voices shout from empty rooms. Walls vibrate with anger that never cooled. And the homestead continues to hold the echo of conflict, long after everyone who created it is gone. At Narrowbone Canyon, the land tightens into steep walls of stone that seem to lean inward as the path descends. Sunlight reaches the ground only briefly each day, sliding across rock and vanishing early. The canyon carries sound in strange ways, bending echoes until distance becomes difficult to judge. The structure is modest, built of weathered timber and stone gathered from nearby slopes. The bones were discovered gradually. At first, they were mistaken for natural debris, pale shapes half buried in dust and gravel. As more were found, scattered across the clearing and along the canyon walls, the pattern became impossible to ignore. They varied in size and shape, but none showed marks of teeth or tools. No fractures. No signs of struggle. They appeared placed rather than left behind. Each bone was catalogued and studied. No clear origin could be determined. They did not match local wildlife patterns. No evidence of flooding or collapse that might explain their distribution. Inside, it was empty, clean, and undisturbed. The case remained open without progress. Locals began sharing stories. They spoke of travelers who camped near the homestead and left before dawn, pale and shaken. Some refused to explain why. Others described the same sensation, a feeling of being observed from beyond the edge of the firelight, where darkness thickened against the canyon walls. At night, the canyon changes. Firelight struggles to reach beyond a short distance, casting uneven shadows that stretch and pull against stone. The air cools rapidly, carrying faint sounds that do not belong to wind or water. Footsteps seem closer than they should be, then vanish entirely. It was during these nights that the figures were first reported. Campers described shapes standing just outside the reach of the flames. They were thin and upright, motionless against the rock. When light shifted, the forms appeared pale, structured, almost familiar in outline. No faces were seen clearly. No movement followed. The figures simply remained, watching. The sensation was not fear alone, but pressure, as if attention itself carried weight. When campers shifted their gaze, the shapes were gone. No sound marked their departure. No disturbance followed. The bones were always there in the morning. They never changed position. They were never joined by new remains. They existed as a constant, silent presence, unaffected by weather or time. Attempts to remove them failed. Bones carried away from the canyon were later found back near the homestead, clean and intact, without explanation. Scientific explanations fell short. No environmental factors accounted for the sightings. No light phenomena explained the shapes. The canyon walls reflected firelight unpredictably, but not with enough consistency to form figures. Audio recordings captured long stretches of silence, broken occasionally by faint clicks or taps that could not be traced to any source. The homestead became a point of avoidance. Trails were rerouted. Warnings were posted without detail. Those who lived nearby avoided the canyon after sunset, especially during nights when clouds covered the stars. They said the darkness felt heavier then, more deliberate. Some researchers returned repeatedly. They documented temperature changes, air pressure shifts, and geological features. They stayed longer than most, setting up controlled camps with multiple light sources. Even then, the edge of illumination remained sharply defined. Not solid, not transparent, but suggested, as if formed by absence rather than matter. The shapes did not approach. They did not retreat. No one reported being touched. No voices were heard. No movement followed the sightings. The experience was passive, yet deeply unsettling, as if being observed by something that did not require interaction. The bones never told their story. They remained scattered, unclaimed by time or explanation. Weather did not wear them down. Dust did not bury them fully. They stayed visible, pale against darker ground, marking the space around the homestead like an unspoken warning. Today, Narrowbone Canyon remains quiet. The homestead stands empty, its door closed, its windows dark. During the day, the site appears calm, almost ordinary. At night, few choose to stay long enough to test the stories. They light fires carefully and keep them burning. They watch the edge of the glow. And when shapes begin to form just beyond the light, standing still against the canyon walls, they understand why the bones remain where they are. And why no explanation has ever been enough. Fog Reach Homestead once stood on a gentle plateau where hills rolled outward into low wetlands. The land was known for sudden weather shifts, but the soil was fertile and the views wide. From the porch, one could see miles of open ground on clear days. The homestead earned its name from the fog that crept in from the marsh each morning, thick but usually brief, lifting as the sun rose. The family who settled there adapted easily. They learned to wait out the mist, marking paths with stones, and keeping doors and windows tightly shut until visibility returned. Fog Reach became a recognizable waypoint for travelers crossing the region. A place to rest and reorient before continuing on. The fog began to change subtly. At first, it lingered longer than usual. Mornings stretched into afternoons with no clear sky. The air felt heavier, dampening sound and flattening distance. The homestead seemed closer one moment, farther the next. Familiar landmarks blurred, then vanished completely behind pale walls of mist. Visitors reported difficulty navigating the grounds during these periods. Paths that once led straight to the road curved unexpectedly. Walking toward visible shapes resulted in no progress, as if the land itself shifted. Most dismissed it as disorientation caused by low visibility. Then people began to lose track of time. Those entering the area during heavy fog often believed only minutes had passed, when in reality hours slipped away. Watches fogged over. Compasses spun slowly, refusing to settle. Voices carried only a short distance before dissolving. The homestead itself faded in and out of view, sometimes appearing intact, sometimes reduced to faint outlines. The most unsettling reports described walking in circles. Individuals attempted to leave the property, choosing a single direction and maintaining steady pace. Despite this, they found themselves returning to the same fence post, the same tree, the same patch of ground. Panic made the fog feel denser, closer, pressing in from all sides. Most survived by stopping. Those who remained still and waited for the fog to lift eventually found the land returned to normal. Paths straightened. Distances made sense again. The homestead reappeared exactly where it should be. These individuals often described the experience as stepping out of a dream, shaken but unharmed. Others were not as fortunate. Search efforts began after multiple travelers failed to return. Teams found no sign of struggle. No damaged equipment. No disturbed ground beyond confused tracks that ended abruptly. The fog would clear, revealing empty fields and silent buildings. It was as if the missing had simply stepped out of the world. The homestead was abandoned soon after. Without residents to maintain it, Fog Reach deteriorated quickly. Wood warped. Roof sections collapsed. The plateau grew quiet. Despite this, reports did not stop. Explorers drawn by curiosity continued to visit, often underestimating the fog. They described the homestead as appearing more complete during mist, as if time reversed briefly. Some claimed to see lights glowing faintly through the haze, suggesting occupancy. Others heard distant footsteps or doors closing somewhere nearby, always just out of reach. None could confirm these impressions once the fog lifted. Researchers attempted to study the phenomenon, mapping the land repeatedly. Measurements taken on clear days matched expectations. During fog, instruments became unreliable. Distance readings fluctuated. Signals weakened. Drones lost orientation and were forced to return automatically. No geological explanation fully accounted for the effect. Local belief holds that fog reach sits at a convergence point where landscape and weather interact unusually. The fog is said to blur not just sight, but direction itself. Without clear reference, the mind fills gaps, creating loops that feel logical while they occur. Panic worsens the effect, tightening the invisible circle. Others believe the homestead became a focal point over time. Years of waiting out fog, of pacing and watching for clarity, left an imprint. When fog returns, that pattern reactivates. Those who vanished are rarely spoken of directly. Their absence is treated as part of the landscape, like a marsh that must be avoided. Warning signs have been placed at access points, advising visitors to stay clear during low visibility. Still, curiosity continues to draw people in. Survivors often describe a specific sensation just before panic sets in. A moment when the fog seems to lean inward, narrowing the world to a small, enclosed space. Sound dulls. Breathing feels louder than it should. Direction loses meaning. Movement feels urgent, but wrong. The key, they say, is patience. Standing still, grounding oneself, waiting for the fog to decide to lift. Those who try to force escape often only deepen the loop. Those who wait may find themselves released. Fog Reach Homestead remains a quiet ruin on a deceptively open plateau. On clear days, it appears harmless. Empty fields stretch outward. The road is easy to find. Nothing suggests danger. But when mist rolls in and the world softens at the edges, the land becomes something else. A place where direction bends. Where distance lies. Where some walk until the fog lifts, and others walk until they are no longer there. The homestead does not pursue. It does not trap with force. It simply waits, wrapped in mist, allowing those who enter to decide how long they will keep moving. The homestead at Whisper Coil Canyon sits where the land narrows and the air begins to turn. Rock walls curve inward, layered and smooth, as if shaped by a slow twisting force rather than erosion alone. Around the structure, trees grow bent and contorted, their trunks spiraling slightly, their branches reaching in directions that defy the slope of the ground. From a distance, the place feels uneasy but quiet. Up close, the wind changes everything. It does not move straight through the canyon. It coils. Air slides along stone, circles back on itself, and gathers speed in unexpected places. Gusts rise suddenly from below, then drop without warning. Leaves rustle when no breeze is felt, and silence falls even as branches sway. The homestead was built early, long before the canyon was mapped or named. Thick walls of stone and timber face inward, away from the deepest bends. Windows are narrow. Doors are reinforced. Whoever built it understood the land well enough to fear it. The property was abandoned without explanation. Daylight offers little hint of what comes after sunset. The trees remain twisted but still. The canyon appears calm, almost peaceful. Visitors often remark on the clarity of sound during the day. Footsteps echo softly. Voices carry just far enough to feel present, but not distorted. At dusk, the wind begins to speak. At first, it sounds like ordinary noise. Air slipping through branches. Stone cooling and cracking. Then, beneath it, something familiar emerges. A tone. A cadence. The shape of a voice that almost makes sense. Listeners often mistake it for memory. The wind calls out in fragments, never full sentences, never clear enough to repeat. It mimics rhythm rather than language. Yet those who hear it feel certain they recognize who is calling. A parent. A sibling. A partner. Someone known deeply, instinctively. The voices do not shout. They plead. They sound tired. Afraid. Close. Visitors describe an immediate emotional pull. Concern rises faster than fear. The urge to respond feels natural, even necessary. The canyon seems to lean in, amplifying the sound, guiding attention toward the deeper bends where the rock curves tighter and the light fades sooner. Following the voices feels like the right thing to do. The path beyond the homestead descends gradually. Stone underfoot grows smoother, worn by time and movement. Trees thin out, replaced by taller rock faces that trap sound and bend it further. The wind grows warmer, more constant, carrying the voices closer with every step. Those who follow notice the voices shift position. Always just ahead. Never visible. If one turns back, it fades into confusion, replaced by silence heavy enough to feel wrong. The homestead becomes difficult to see after only a short distance. Many who have ventured into Whisper Coil Canyon report losing track of direction. Landmarks repeat. Corners resemble one another too closely. The canyon feels longer than it should be, deeper than maps suggest. Compasses spin. Devices lose signal. Time stretches. The voices remain steady. Search and rescue records include multiple incidents where hikers were found miles from their intended routes, exhausted and disoriented, convinced they had been following someone who needed help. None could describe the voice clearly. All insisted it sounded familiar. Some were never found. Locals say the canyon learned how to call long ago. That grief and longing soaked into the stone after too many losses. They believe the wind does not create the voices, but carries them, reshaping old echoes into something persuasive. They warn never to answer. The twisted trees surrounding the homestead are said to be markers, shaped by years of resisting the pull inward. Their roots grow deep and tangled, gripping the earth as if to keep from being drawn along with the sound. Branches curve back toward the house, pointing away from the canyon's depths. At night, the trees creak softly, responding to shifting air. Their movement creates shadows that twist and overlap, mirroring the spiral of the canyon walls. Inside the homestead, the wind is quieter, but not silent. Visitors who stay indoors after dark report hearing voices just beyond the walls, calling their names softly, patiently. Those who leave the house at night rarely return quickly. They report stepping outside to check a sound and finding themselves walking without realizing it. Drawn forward by the sense that someone important is waiting just ahead. By the time doubt sets in, the canyon has already narrowed. No signs of struggle have ever been found. No broken tools. No torn clothing. Only paths that end abruptly at smooth stone walls, where sound behaves unpredictably and the wind coils endlessly through the dark. The homestead remains intact, untouched by time more than expected. Dust gathers slowly. Furniture remains in place. Windows face away from the canyon's deepest turns, as if deliberately refusing to look. Locals keep their distance. They say the wind does not lie outright. It only borrows truth. A familiar voice. A remembered concern. A promise of reunion. The canyon takes what follows willingly, never needing to chase. Whisper Coil Canyon remains open to travelers, but rarely visited. Signs warn of unstable paths and sudden weather changes. None mention the voices. Yet when the wind shifts just right, and the canyon begins to breathe in spirals, the calls return. Soft. Familiar. leading anyone who listens deeper into the winding stone, where the voices never stop, and the path never quite ends. Gravel Heart Homestead rests on a stretch of land that never fully settles. The ground beneath it shifts subtly, a mixture of stone and compacted earth that crunches softly underfoot even when untouched. From a distance, the homestead appears stable, weathered but standing, framed by low hills and sparse vegetation that bends easily in the wind. Those who built it knew the land was unstable. They chose it anyway. The soil was easy to clear, rich with stone that drained water quickly. Foundations went in deep, reinforced against movement. The structure was solid, its beams thick and its floors carefully leveled. The builders believed effort and precision could overcome any weakness in the ground. For a time, it seemed they were right. The homestead functioned as intended. Days passed quietly. Nights were calm. The land shifted now and then, producing small sounds beneath the floor. But nothing unusual for a place built on gravel and stone. Then the vibrations began. At first, they were barely noticeable. A faint tremor under bare feet late at night. A subtle movement felt through bed frames and chairs. The sensation was easy to dismiss, attributed to wind, settling beams, or imagination. But the vibrations developed a pattern. They came only after dark. They were slow and steady. Not random, not sharp, but measured, repeating at regular intervals. Those who noticed it described the feeling as unsettlingly familiar, like standing above something moving with intention. Like a heartbeat. The floor vibrated softly, rising and falling in a rhythm that never changed. It was not strong enough to shake objects loose or cause visible damage. It was gentle, persistent, and impossible to ignore once noticed. They lay awake, counting the pulses beneath them, trying to convince themselves it would stop. It never did. The vibration continued for hours, fading only as dawn approached. Curiosity replaced denial. They searched the property for explanations. Underground water was considered, but no flow matched the rhythm. Small seismic activity was ruled out. Animals were suspected, but traps revealed nothing. The land remained quiet during the day, offering no hint of movement beneath the surface. Neighbors noticed changes as well. They spoke of feeling uneasy near the homestead at night, a faint hum traveling through the ground when they stood still. Some claimed they could feel it through their boots, subtle but distinct, strongest near the center of the structure. The family debated leaving. They hesitated, bound by investment and pride. The homestead had cost them everything. Walking away felt impossible. Instead, they adapted. Rugs were laid down. Furniture was rearranged. Night routines shifted to avoid the most affected rooms. Nothing helped. The vibration persisted, unaffected by changes above ground. It remained steady, patient, indifferent to human response. Alongside the vibration came a low, muffled noise, felt more than heard. It resembled pressure moving through gravel, stone adjusting under weight. The sound never broke the surface, but it carried through the foundation, slow and deliberate. The family stopped inviting visitors. They avoided speaking about the homestead, fearing concern or disbelief. Sleep deprivation took its toll. The night rhythm became a constant presence, shaping every decision, every thought. Eventually, they left. The departure was quiet. No announcement. No explanation. One day the homestead was occupied. The next, it was empty. Belongings were removed carefully. Doors were locked. The land was left to itself. The vibration did not stop. Visitors who later entered the homestead reported the same sensation. At night, the floor began to move softly beneath their feet. Instruments were brought in. The rhythm was unchanged, identical to descriptions given years earlier. Some compared it to standing on the chest of a sleeping animal. Others described it as mechanical, but no machinery could be found. Seismic sensors detected minimal activity, nothing that explained the consistent pulse. Ground-penetrating scans showed dense layers of gravel and stone, disturbed in places, compressed in unnatural patterns. There were voids below the foundation, irregular and deep, but no clear structure or object. Rumors spread. Some said something was buried below, something that should not have been covered. Others believed the land itself had a living quality, reacting to weight and pressure over time. The name Gravel Heart Homestead emerged from those stories, a reference to the steady pulse beneath the floor. Nighttime experiences grew more intense. The vibration seemed stronger in silence, more noticeable when no one moved. Sitting still made it clearer. Lying down made it impossible to ignore. Some visitors claimed the rhythm subtly adjusted, slowing or quickening, though no two reports agreed on how. No cracks formed. No objects shifted. The homestead remained structurally sound, as if the motion beneath was careful not to disturb what rested above it. Those who stayed too long felt a growing sense of unease. The vibration was not threatening, but it was personal. It felt aware of presence, responding without reacting. People described the sensation of being noticed, not watched, but acknowledged. By morning, the homestead returned to stillness. The ground hardened. The pulse faded. Daylight erased all signs of activity. Standing in the same rooms during the day revealed nothing unusual. The land appeared ordinary, silent, and stable. Yet everyone agreed on one thing. Buried deep under layers of stone and earth, something continued its steady rhythm, unaffected by abandonment or time. Whether it was memory, pressure, or something else entirely, no one could say. The homestead stands empty now. Wind passes through broken fencing. Gravel shifts underfoot. The structure waits quietly through daylight hours, giving no warning of what stirs below. But when night falls and the land grows still, the floor begins to vibrate once more. Softly. Steadily. Like a heartbeat beneath the earth. The broken lantern homestead stands at the end of a narrow dirt road where trees lean inward and block most of the sky. By day, the place looks unremarkable, a weathered house with a sagging porch and windows clouded by age. Nothing about it suggests movement or life. The land around it is quiet, undisturbed, as if forgotten rather than abandoned. Travelers passing through the area report seeing warm points of light glowing behind the windows. Lanterns appear to sway gently, casting slow arcs of illumination across empty rooms. The movement feels intentional, almost welcoming, like a signal meant to be followed. The road offers few alternatives after sunset. Those who see the lights often assume someone lives there, someone willing to offer directions or shelter. The glow feels human, familiar, a promise of safety in an otherwise dark stretch of land. Many decide to approach, guided by the steady motion of lanterns that never flicker or fade. As they draw closer, the lights adjust. Lanterns appear in different rooms, as if carried from place to place. One window darkens while another brightens. The front door becomes visible, outlined by a soft halo. The porch creaks faintly even before a foot touches it, as if responding in anticipation. Inside, the house is empty. Furniture sits neatly arranged. Dust lies undisturbed except where light falls, revealing clean paths across the floor. Lanterns hang from hooks along the walls, their glass intact, their flames steady despite the lack of airflow. They swing slowly, even when no one passes near them. Travelers describe a strong sense of direction once inside. Doors stand open, revealing lit hallways that seemed to lead deeper into the house. Other rooms remain dark, uninviting, their entrances swallowed by shadow. The illuminated path feels clear, almost reassuring, encouraging forward movement without the need for thought. Footsteps echo softly. The sound carries farther than expected, repeating slightly out of sync, as if the house itself responds. Lantern light stretches along the walls, guiding each turn. No voices are heard. No signs of another presence appear. Yet the feeling of being accompanied remains. Then the doors close. It happens quietly, without force. A door that was open moments before rests firmly in its frame. Another locks with a soft click, subtle enough to be missed until escape is attempted. The lanterns continue to sway, their light unchanged, illuminating the realization that something has shifted. Those trapped inside describe a growing stillness. The house seems to settle, as if completing a task. Lanterns stop moving from room to room and remain fixed in place, lighting only certain areas. Windows no longer show the outside clearly. Darkness presses against the glass, reflecting lantern light back inward. Panic rarely comes immediately. Instead, there is confusion, followed by a careful search for exits. Doors that once opened easily no longer respond. Windows resist pressure, their frames firm and unyielding. The lanterns provide enough light to see, but not enough to feel safe. Time behaves strangely inside the homestead. Clocks, when present, tick unevenly. Phones lose signal, their screens dimming faster than expected. The sense of passing minutes stretches and compresses, making it difficult to judge how long one has been inside. Most accounts end with escape. Travelers describe doors unlocking without warning, often near dawn. The lanterns dim as quickly as they once appeared, leaving rooms in shadow. Those who exit do so urgently, without looking back, stepping into a world that feels louder and brighter than before. Some are found wandering the road hours later, disoriented and exhausted. They struggle to describe what happened inside, their memories fragmented and incomplete. They recall light, movement, and the certainty that the house wanted them to stay. Authorities have investigated multiple times. They find no power source for the lights. No mechanical systems capable of moving lanterns or locking doors. During inspections, the homestead remains inert, dark and silent, its interior unchanged and unresponsive. Attempts to stay overnight under controlled conditions have failed. Lights appear only when observers are absent or distracted. Cameras capture brief glows, then nothing. Motion sensors trigger without visible cause. The phenomenon resists documentation, revealing itself only to those who encounter it unprepared. Locals avoid the area after sunset. They know the pattern well. Lights appear on nights when travelers are expected, when the road is busy or the weather poor. The lanterns themselves are never found broken. Despite the name, every glass globe remains intact. The light they produce does not behave like flame, casting shadows that bend slightly away from corners, leaving some spaces untouched. The broken lantern homestead remains standing. By day, it looks ordinary, even dull. By night, it becomes something else entirely, a structure defined not by walls and doors, but by invitation and restraint. Those who follow the lights rarely forget the experience. They remember being guided. And they remember the certainty that the lanterns were not meant to help them leave, but to help the house decide when to let them go. Canyon Mouth Homestead rests where a narrow valley opens into a wide plain, pressed close against towering stone walls that rise like a natural gate. The homestead was built there for protection and water, not for silence. The settlers who chose the site valued the stone walls. They shielded the house from harsh weather and created a sense of enclosure. During the day, sunlight reflected warmly off the rock, filling the homestead with steady light. At night, the canyon cooled quickly, and the walls seemed to draw close, holding the space in quiet stillness. Life followed a predictable rhythm. Animals were tended at dawn. Work filled the long hours. Evenings ended early, with doors shut and lamps lowered. The canyon amplified sound, so people learned to speak softly. Shouts echoed too long. Laughter returned in unfamiliar tones. Over time, the residents adjusted, treating the walls as neighbors that listened but never spoke. That changed gradually. The first reports described hearing voices that did not belong to anyone present. They were faint and indistinct, blending with the natural echoes of the canyon. At first, they were dismissed as tricks of sound, fragments of conversation carried from far away. But the words repeated, and repetition drew attention. Names were spoken. Not shouted, not whispered, but stated plainly, as if being read aloud. The voices came directly from the stone walls, emerging from multiple points at once. A name would echo, fade, then return from a different angle. Sometimes the name belonged to a former resident. Sometimes it was unfamiliar. Soon after came dates. Spoken slowly, evenly, without context. Years. Months. Days. The cadence felt deliberate, measured, like a record being recited rather than a message being sent. The final words unsettled people most. Those who listened closely reported physical discomfort. At first, it was pressure behind the eyes. A dull ache that grew sharper the longer the voices continued. Some felt a ringing in the ears that did not fade when the sound stopped. Others experienced sudden nosebleeds, brief but alarming, starting without warning and ending just as abruptly. The effects were strongest when standing close to the canyon walls. Stepping into open ground reduced the intensity. Leaving the area brought relief, though headaches often lingered for hours. Repeated exposure worsened symptoms. Several individuals required medical attention after extended listening, though no permanent damage was found. The voices did not stop. The homestead was abandoned not because of a single incident, but because the voices did not stop. They returned unpredictably. Sometimes during the day, more often at dusk or night. The walls did not respond to sound or movement. Shouting into the canyon produced normal echoes, but the voices emerged independently, unaffected by human presence. Researchers later confirmed that some of the names and dates corresponded to individuals who had passed through the region decades earlier. Some were former residents. Others were travelers whose connection to the homestead remained unclear. No single event linked them all. Attempts to record the voices produced mixed results. Microphones placed against the stone captured faint vibrations even when no sound was audible to the ear. Playback revealed distorted fragments matching the reported words, though timing and clarity varied. Extended recording sessions caused equipment failures, including sudden power loss and corrupted files. Geological surveys showed nothing unusual about the rock composition. The canyon walls were dense and ancient, shaped by erosion over thousands of years. Acoustically, the site behaved normally during controlled tests. The voices appeared only when conditions were unstructured and prolonged. Local belief suggests the canyon acts as a reservoir for memory. That years of spoken words, emotions, and moments were absorbed into the stone through repetition and confinement. The homestead, positioned at the canyon mouth, became a focal point where these stored fragments surfaced. Not as communication, but as release. The voices do not respond. They do not answer questions or react to interruption. They repeat, cycle, and fade, only to return later with different sequences. Listening feels intrusive, as if overhearing something never meant to be shared. Visitors are advised to limit time near the walls. Those who remain longer than recommended often describe a sense of mental pressure, as if thoughts are being crowded out by external sound. Concentration becomes difficult. The canyon feels closer, heavier, more insistent. At dawn, the homestead is quiet. Sunlight washes over stone. Wind moves gently through the opening. No voices carry. The walls appear inert and distant, just rock shaped by time. It is easy to doubt the reports in full daylight. But as shadows stretch and sound begins to travel farther, the canyon changes. Names return, spoken without breath. Dates follow, precise and detached. Final words surface, incomplete and unresolved. Canyon Mouth Homestead remains standing, weathered but intact. The land does not forbid visitors, but it does not welcome long attention. It offers fragments of human presence without context or comfort. And those who listen too closely learn quickly that some echoes are not meant to be followed, only acknowledged from a distance, before stepping away and allowing the canyon to fall silent once more. The deepest homestead lies in Hollow End Canyon, a place where the land narrows until sky becomes a distant ribbon overhead. The canyon walls rise tall and smooth, pressing close enough that sound lingers and light arrives late, leaving long stretches of cool shadow even at midday. The journey inward feels longer than distance alone can explain. Paths descend gradually, winding between stone faces that seem unchanged no matter how far one travels. Footsteps echo softly, then fade. The air grows still, heavy with the scent of dust and mineral dampness. Breathing slows without effort, as if the canyon itself sets the pace. Travelers often report the first sensation not as fear, but relief. Muscles loosen. Shoulders drop. The weight of movement begins to feel unnecessary. Packs seem heavier than before, not from added load, but from a growing reluctance to carry them any farther. Thoughts drift. The urge to pause settles in gently. This is how Hollow End Canyon welcomes visitors. The homestead rests at the farthest point, where the canyon ends not in a wall, but in a broad hollow shaped like a basin. The stone opens just enough to allow a muted glow of light that never fully brightens the ground. The structure itself is modest, built low against the rock, using stone that matches the canyon walls so closely it is difficult to distinguish where the land ends and the shelter begins. Nothing about the homestead appears damaged or abandoned. Doors hang straight. Windows remain intact. The ground around it is smooth, worn not by neglect, but by repeated presence. There are no clear signs of recent life, yet the space feels prepared, as though waiting rather than forgotten. Those who reach the homestead describe a sudden wave of exhaustion unlike anything felt on the journey down. Legs feel weak. Breathing deepens. The simple act of standing requires focus. Many sit without thinking, lowering themselves onto the stone steps or the cool earth beside the walls. Rest feels immediate and profound. The canyon grows quieter here. Wind rarely reaches the basin. Sound seems absorbed by the surrounding rock. Even voices feel out of place, quickly swallowed if spoken aloud. The stillness carries a sense of comfort, like the hush of a place meant for sleep. Some travelers attempt to shake the feeling, urging themselves to stay alert, to leave quickly. Others decide to rest only briefly. Just a moment to recover before heading back the way they came. Few remember standing up again. Search records describe hikers found days later along the canyon's upper paths, disoriented but alive, unable to recall how much time they spent resting. Others were found asleep against stone walls, difficult to wake, insisting they had only closed their eyes for seconds. Locals speak of Hollow End Canyon with careful restraint. They describe it not as dangerous, but persuasive. They believe the canyon draws fatigue out of the body, encouraging stillness the way deep water encourages sinking. They say the homestead was built intentionally, placed where rest feels inevitable. And some were never found at all. According to regional stories, the original occupants were travelers who sought refuge from constant movement. They believed there was wisdom in stopping completely, in allowing the land to carry the burden of effort. Over time, they stopped leaving the basin, content to remain where nothing asked them to move again. The canyon, it is said, learned from them. Modern researchers have offered explanations. Thin air. Mineral exposure. Acoustic dampening affecting perception. None fully account for the intensity or consistency of the exhaustion reported. Instruments function normally. Oxygen levels remain safe. Yet even experienced climbers and guides feel the same pull. The urge to sit. The urge to rest. Those who camp near the homestead describe unusually deep sleep. Dreams come quickly and vividly, filled with images of stone and warmth and weightlessness. Waking feels unnecessary. Time loses meaning. Watches are often found stopped, though batteries test fully charged afterward. Attempts to map the homestead precisely have failed. Coordinates shift between recordings. Trails that lead directly to it one day seem to fade the next. Markers placed along the path are discovered farther downslope, as if gently moved during the night. The canyon resists urgency. By afternoon, light fades earlier here than anywhere else nearby. Shadows climb the walls slowly, stretching until the basin exists in permanent twilight. The homestead blends further into the stone, its edges softened by the dimness. Those who remain too long feel no fear. That is what unsettles survivors most. No sense of danger. No sense of panic. Only the feeling that staying makes sense, that effort is unnecessary, that leaving can wait until later. The canyon does not trap. It invites. It allows the body to decide when enough movement has been done. Locals warn visitors never to sit down in Hollow End Canyon. Never to remove their packs. Never to lean against the stone, no matter how welcoming it feels. They say the canyon gives rest generously, but takes direction in return. The homestead remains unclaimed and unmarked. No signs point the way. No barriers block the descent. Official records list the area as difficult terrain with limited access. It simply waits for them to stop walking. And when someone finally does, the canyon grows quiet, the homestead stands ready, and the deepest rest settles in, gentle and complete. For many, it is the last place they ever choose to remain. You have now walked through 20 haunted remote canyon homesteads in Idaho. Places shaped by isolation. By desperation. By silence so heavy it still lingers. These canyons may seem empty. Peaceful. Beautiful. But beneath the wind and stone, something remembers. The land remembers fear. And the homesteads remember the people who never escaped. If you ever travel through Idaho's remote canyons, respect the land. Do not enter abandoned homes. And never follow voices you cannot see. Because some places are not empty. They are waiting. Thank you for spending this quiet, unsettling time with me. Slow your breathing. Let your thoughts settle. And if you hear something moving in the distance tonight, remember. Isolation can be far more terrifying than darkness. Until we meet again, stay safe.